Kaelith Dominion had never lost a war. 900 years of conquest, 6,000 star systems, 41 species reduced to ash, to slaves, or to silence. Their fleets did not fight wars, they ended arguments. The flagship Voron's judgment was 11 kilometers of black hull and violet fire. It did not orbit planets. It hovered over them, like a blade held to a throat. Admiral Cressel Vorn had commanded that blade for 83 years. He had watched 41 homeworlds go dark beneath it. He had a method, it never failed. Step 1, study the target species. Step 2, find the weakness that keeps them alive. Step 3, turn that weakness into a grave. For most species, the weakness was food. For some, it was air. For a few, it was the fragile chemistry of their own blood. Vorn had ended entire civilizations by poisoning the thing they needed most. For humanity, the Dominion scientists found something simpler than all of it. Water. Every human body was over 60% water. Every human city depended on rivers, reservoirs, and pipes buried beneath the ground. Cut the water and a species dies quietly. No battle, no glory, just silence. Vorn found it almost insulting. A species this fragile had no right to hold a system as valuable as Sol. Sol's system sat at the edge of the Orion Arm, 3 unremarkable planets around an unremarkable star. But its asteroid belts were rich. Its gas giants were rich. And its third planet, according to 2 centuries of quiet Dominion surveillance, was covered in life. "Send the probes," Vorn ordered. "Let us see what we are dealing with." 3,000 reconnaissance drones descended toward Earth's atmosphere. They found farmland stretching across continents. They found cities glowing at night like scattered embers. They found no orbital defense grid worth the name. Vorn read the report twice. "They have nothing," he said. "No shipyards, no fleet, no shield network, a species of 8 billion and not one warship in orbit." His strategist, a narrow-eyed officer named Thessa Rin, hesitated before speaking. "Admiral, something feels wrong." Vorn did not look up from the report. "Wrong how?" "They should have something. Every species has something. Even the Haven had spears before we arrived. Even the Corvi had walls." Vorn closed the file. "Then we will find nothing, conquer everything, and go home before the season ends." He turned to the tactical map glowing above the command table. Sol's system rotated slowly in blue light, small and quiet, at the center of 900 red markers. "Set course," he said, "full fleet." He did not know it yet, but humanity had been waiting for him for 40 years. 40 years before Admiral Vorn ever set course for Sol, a much smaller Dominion vessel had entered the same system. A scout ship, unarmed, silent. It had drifted past Neptune, past Jupiter, and into low orbit above Earth without triggering a single alarm on any human network. Or so the Dominion believed. That scout ship had vanished 3 days later. The official report, filed and forgotten in a Dominion archive nobody read anymore, listed the cause as unknown system failure. It was not a system failure. It was the first move in a war that had not yet been declared. The Dominion had conquered 41 species using the same 3-step method. Every species had a pattern. Every pattern had a weakness. Every weakness became a grave. The Haven had built their cities on floating platforms above a toxic ocean. The Dominion poisoned the platform's anchor systems and let the sea do the rest. The Corvi had built vast underground granaries to survive their world's long winters. The Dominion collapsed the tunnels and waited out the season. 41 times the method had worked. 41 times a species had been studied, measured, and erased with almost no cost to the Dominion at all. Vorn had commanded 11 of those 41 campaigns personally. He had never once needed a second wave of anything. He did not expect to need one now. What none of those 41 species had ever done was catch the Dominion scouting them first. Humanity had. The Dominion fleet crossed into Sol's outer system on what humans would have called a Tuesday. Nobody aboard the fleet called it that. To the Dominion, it was cycle 4471, day 12. 900 warships crossed the orbit of Neptune in a single formation, hulls blotting out the stars behind them. Sensors on Earth registered the fleet's mass and returned numbers that made 3 separate analysts request a recalibration. The numbers did not change. Vorn watched Earth grow larger on his viewport, blue, fragile, undefended as far as his sensors could tell. He had seen 1,000 worlds look this way in the final hours before conquest. "No planetary shield," said Thessarin, reading her console. "No orbital weapons platforms. No visible fleet of any kind." "As expected," Vorn said. "Admiral, there are structures in low orbit, small, non-military signatures, communication satellites most likely." "Then ignore them." Behind him, junior officers whispered among themselves. Word had already spread through the fleet. This would be the fastest conquest of Vorn's career. Some had placed wagers on how many hours it would take. Vorn allowed it. Confidence was useful. It kept a crew sharp before a fight and calm after one. A young weapons officer named Corvin Desk approached the command table, eager, barely out of his first century of service. "Admiral, requesting permission to log this as my first campaign kill count." Vorn almost smiled. "Almost. Log it as you wish, Desk. There will be no resistance to record." "None at all, Admiral. They have farmland and cities, boy, not armies. Watch and learn what an easy war looks like. You may not see another one like it in your career." Desk returned to his station, already composing the report he would send home to his family once the conquest was complete. He would never send that report. None of the crew who believed this war would be easy ever got the chance. On a secondary display, a junior analyst flagged something odd about Earth's orbital satellites, an irregular pulse in their transmission pattern that repeated every 11 seconds. He filed the anomaly as low priority and moved on to more pressing matters. Nobody on the bridge ever looked at that report again. It would have told them everything. He gave the order that had ended 41 civilizations before this one. Deploy the cleansing agent into their water systems. Let them drown from the inside. The Dominion called it the cleansing agent. It was a molecular compound engineered over 3 centuries, designed to bond with water at a cellular level and turn it into a slow poison. It killed nothing quickly. It killed everything eventually. 40,000 delivery pods launched from orbit. Each one burned through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star. Each one was aimed at a river, a reservoir, or a coastline. The Dominion had mapped every major water source on the planet using nothing more than passive orbital scans. On the bridge, officers watched the pods fall in perfect silence. It was, by Dominion standards, an elegant weapon. No fire, no noise, no resistance to overcome. "Population confirmation," Vorn said. "How many humans exist on this planet?" 8,300,000,000, Thessa answered. Vorn allowed himself something close to satisfaction. It was the closest thing to joy that 83 years of war had left in him. "In 6 months, that number will be 0. He turned from the viewport, already thinking of the next system on the Dominion's list. "Phase 1 complete," he said. "Begin orbital garrison. We will watch them die from here." Down on the surface, none of it looked like the ending of a species. In a coastal city on the eastern edge of North America, a woman named Dana Ose sat at a console 300 meters below street level, sipping coffee she had made from tap water 20 minutes earlier. Above her, 40,000 tiny fires streaked across the morning sky. News anchors called them a meteor shower. Nobody outside a very small circle of people called them anything else. Dana did not look up from her monitor. She had been waiting for this exact moment for 6 years. Ever since she was recruited out of graduate school into a program she had signed papers promising never to name. Above ground, in a windowless room beneath the same city, a small group of officials watched the same descending pods on a private feed relayed from orbital tracking stations that did not appear on any public map. Among them sat General Marcus Hale, the last living member of the original task force that had dismantled the Dominion scout ship 4 decades earlier. He had been a young engineer then. He was an old man now. He had spent 40 years waiting for a message he hoped would never come, and today it had come anyway. "Confirm pod trajectory," Hale said, voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Confirmed," an aide answered. "Matches the projection exactly. Water systems, coastlines, reservoirs, just like the simulations predicted down to the delivery pattern." Hale allowed himself a single breath before speaking again. "Then everything after this is exactly as we planned it. Authorized deep filter activation across every facility." "Authorized," the aide confirmed. Hale looked up at the ceiling, at the sky beyond it he could not see, and at the fleet he knew was watching from orbit, utterly certain it faced no resistance at all. 40 years, he said quietly. Let's see if it was enough. A soft chime sounded on Dana's console, 300 meters below him. "Here we go," she said quietly and pressed a single key. He did not know that every single pod had already been detected, tracked, measured, expected. 40 years early. The pod struck Earth's oceans, rivers, and reservoirs within 11 minutes of Atmos. Ferric entry. Dominion sensors registered successful impact across every target. Water samples should have shown immediate molecular contamination spreading through every major population center within the hour. They did not. Thessa Ryn stared at her console. She ran the scan again. The numbers refused to change. "Admiral, the cleansing agent isn't binding." Vorn crossed the bridge in 3 strides. "Explain." "I can't. The compound is present in the water. It's just inert, neutralized, like it never activated at all." "Run a diagnostic on the compound itself. Perhaps it degraded in transit." "I already did. The compound is fully active, Admiral. It simply isn't working." On the surface of Earth, something else was happening. Something the Dominion had no sensors calibrated to detect, because it had never occurred to them that a species without visible starships could still out-engineer them underground. Beneath every major city, hidden for decades under bureaucratic budgets and quiet defense contracts, sat facilities the world had never officially named. Governments called them water security infrastructure. In press releases nobody read past the headline. Soldiers called them the deep filters. Each one was buried 300 meters underground. Each one processed water through 7 independent layers of filtration, neutralization, and molecular scanning. They had been built to survive nuclear fallout, chemical war, and biological collapse. They had been built specifically for this exact moment. In Facility 7, beneath what used to be simply called Chicago, Dana Osa watched green lights run down every panel in front of her. "Contaminant detected," she said calmly into her headset. "Neutralizing." Her supervisor's voice crackled back through the line, thousands of kilometers away in a facility she had never seen. "Confirm neutralization successful." "Confirmed," Dana said, "just like the drill, 1,000 times just like the drill." Above them, cities kept running. Taps kept flowing. Children brushed their teeth with water that had, moments earlier, carried a poison engineered across 3 centuries to end a species. Nobody in those cities panicked, because nobody in those cities had ever been told there was a threat to begin with. That secrecy had cost billions of dollars and decades of political will to maintain. It had also saved every single life inside those city limits. In Facility 112, buried beneath the Nile Delta, An engineer named Terkabud watched the same green lights bloom across his own console. He had trained for this exact scenario for 11 years. He had never once believed, deep down, that he would live to see it happen. Contaminant neutralized, he reported. All 7 layers held. His supervisor's reply came through static, calm despite the moment. Copy that, Facility 112. How does it feel? Terk looked at the readout, at 8 billion lives that did not yet know how close they had come to the end of their story. Feels like the drills were worth it, he said. Across the Pacific, in a facility built into the side of a dormant volcano, a team of 6 worked in total silence, watching their own panels turn from red to amber to green. Nobody spoke until the final confirmation came through. Then, quietly, someone allowed themselves a single held breath, released. 412 facilities, 412 confirmations, not one failure. Across the planet, 412 identical facilities did exactly what Dana's had done. Not one of them failed. On the Dominion flagship, Vorn stared at failure for the first time in 83 years of unbroken conquest. "This is not possible," he said quietly. "Admiral," said a communications officer near the rear of the bridge. "Second wave of pods ready to deploy. Do we proceed?" Vorn hesitated. Hesitation was not something his crew had ever seen from him. "Deploy," he said finally. "Triple the concentration." The second wave fell an hour later. It met the same silence as the first. In the windowless room beneath the city, General Hale watched the second wave of pods strike the same rivers, the same reservoirs, the same coastlines. His aide read out the same result a second time. "Neutralized," she said. "Every facility, every layer holding at 100%. Hale nodded slowly. "Send word to the other facilities. Tell them Phase 1 held. Tell them 40 years was enough." Across the world, in rooms nobody outside a small circle would ever know existed, that same message reached engineers, soldiers, and scientists who had spent their careers preparing for a single afternoon. Some of them wept. Most of them simply went back to work, because the next phase had already begun. Thessa did not answer his growing frustration. She was too busy watching a second alert appear on her screen, one she did not understand yet, one that would matter far more than a failed poisoning. Something in Earth's crust had just changed. Heat signatures were rising from beneath the surface in patterns that made no sense for a species with no known industry, beyond agriculture and simple orbital communication. "Admiral," she said slowly, "you need to see this." Vorn ordered a full sensor sweep of the planet. What came back should have been impossible. Beneath Earth's surface, heat signatures bloomed in over 400 locations. Massive ones, industrial ones, signatures that did not belong to a species with no fleet. "Admiral," Thessa said, voice tight, "I'm reading shipyards, underground shipyards, hundreds of them buried beneath mountain ranges, ice caps, and ocean floor." Vorn stepped toward the display. Grid coordinates lit up across every continent, dozens of red points beneath the Rockies, dozens more beneath the Himalayas, a cluster the size of a small nation hidden under the Antarctic ice. "That is not possible," he said. "Our probes found nothing." "Your probes found what they were meant to find," said a new voice. It came through every comm channel on the Dominion fleet at once. Human, calm, unafraid. It carried none of the panic Vorn had heard from 41 dying species before this one. "My name is Fleet Director Alina Reyes," the voice said. "You poisoned our water 40 years ago in a smaller way in a much smaller test. We caught it then too." Vorn's hands tightened behind his back. "That attack was not authorized by this fleet," he said, "and it was technically true." "We know," Reyes answered. "It was authorized by the same Dominion that authorized this one, the same empire, the same method. Study the target, find the weakness, poison the water. You have done this 41 times before us. We read every line of that history the day we opened your scout ship's databanks." Vorn said nothing. There was nothing to say to a species that had read his empire's entire war record before he had ever set course for their system. "No," Reyes answered. "It was a Kaelith scouting probe, small, quiet, unarmed. It was supposed to observe us and vanish, and we were supposed to never notice it happened at all. We noticed. On Earth, deep beneath the Andes Mountains, a chamber the size of a small city powered on for the first time in a decade. Dana Osai's console flashed with a designation she had trained for but never once seen go live. Project Meridian active. 40 years earlier, that first scout probe had drifted silently into Earth orbit and transmitted 3 days of passive sensor data before a joint task force of engineers, scientists, and a handful of very quiet governments intercepted it, disabled it, and took it apart piece by piece in a facility that officially did not exist. What they found inside changed the trajectory of human civilization more than any single event in recorded history. Alloy compositions no human metallurgist could explain. Drive systems built around principles that rewrote 3 branches of physics overnight. Targeting arrays capable of tracking a bullet across a battlefield the size of a continent. And buried in its systems, fragments of Dominion battle history, 41 conquests, 41 silences. The joint task force that dismantled that scout ship did not report their findings to the public. They reported them to 14 heads of state in a single closed meeting that lasted 3 days and produced no press release, no leaked memo, and no official record beyond a single classified file. The conclusion of that meeting was simple. A species existed that had already destroyed 41 civilizations. It would eventually find Earth. And when it did, it would expect a species with no fleet, no shield, and no warning. So humanity decided to become exactly that, on the surface. Humanity did not panic. Humanity got to work. Every ocean got its deep filters. Every city got shielded infrastructure disguised as municipal water projects. And beneath the mountains, the deserts, and the ice caps, humanity built 412 shipyards that never once appeared on a single surface scan, because every single one of them had been built to look, from orbit, like nothing at all. The project consumed 40 years, $11 trillion in resources routed through budgets that never used its real name, and 3 generations of engineers who trained their replacements before retiring without ever telling their own families what they had spent their lives building. Some of them did not live to see this day. Their names were etched into a wall inside the Andes facility, a wall Elena Reyes had walked past every morning for the past 6 years, reading names of people who had given their careers to a war they were told might never come. It had come. Rey's voice continued, calm as still water. "You spent 40 years thinking we were harmless," she said. "You spent 40 years never once asking why your scout ship went dark and stayed dark. We spent those same 40 years preparing for exactly this. Fleet on exactly this day." Vorn's officers exchanged glances across the bridge. On the tactical display, one shipyard door began to open, then another. "Admiral," Thessa said, her voice barely above a whisper, "all 412 shipyards are opening at once." "Phase 2 complete," Reyes said. "Say hello to the Meridian fleet." The first human ship rose out of the Pacific Ocean like a mountain breaking the surface. It was called the Ares Requiem. 4 kilometers of dark alloy, built from metals mined from 3 different moons and assembled by machines that had worked without rest for 4 decades. Water cascaded off its hull in sheets as it climbed toward orbit. Behind it came another, then 20, then 200. Vorn watched the numbers climb on his display and felt something he had not felt in 83 years of war. "Doubt. Ship count," he ordered. 412 confirmed launches, Thessa said. Still rising, estimated tonnage exceeds our entire fleet combined. That is not possible. A species this size cannot build a fleet this size in secret. They didn't build it from nothing, Admiral. Thessa's hands moved rapidly across her console, pulling up hull scans, drive signatures, weapon emission patterns. Look at the hull composition. Look at the drive signatures. This isn't new technology to us. Some of it is 100 years behind our current fleet, but some of it is decades ahead. Vorn's blood ran cold before he even asked the question. Ahead of what? Thessa turned to him, her face pale. Ahead of anything in the archive that ship carried, Admiral. They didn't just copy our technology. They understood it. They improved it. They've had 40 years to turn our own blueprint into something better than the original. On the bridge speakers, Ray's voice returned, calmer than before and colder for it. You gave us the blueprint the day your scout ship went silent, she said. We spent 40 years turning your own knowledge against you, one generation of engineers at a time. The Meridian fleet moved into formation around the Dominion's 900 warships, not attacking, not yet, surrounding. Human fleet hold position, Vorn ordered, though he already suspected they would not. They did not. The Ares Requiem fired first. A single beam of condensed gravitic energy tore through the Dominion cruiser Halex Ward and cut it into 3 burning pieces before its shields could even register a threat level above minimal. Alarms exploded across the Dominion fleet. Return fire, Vorn shouted. All ships return fire. 900 warships opened fire on 412 human vessels. The void around Earth lit up brighter than its own sun, weapons fire crossing in every direction, hull fragments spinning off into the dark. Human shields held. Not perfectly, not without cost. 3 human ships fell in the first 2 minutes, their crews lost in silence at the edge of the only home they had ever known. But the rest held, ship after ship, wave after wave, in a way the Dominion's own targeting computers insisted should not be mathematically possible. Their shielding technology is 30 years ahead of projections, Thessa said, voice shaking now. Admiral, we are losing this engagement, not slowly, quickly. Across the battle line, a Dominion destroyer named the Cressa Vale attempted to break through the human formation and strike directly at the Ares Requiem. 3 human ships moved to intercept without a single order broadcast between them, closing the gap in under 4 seconds. The Cressa Vale did not reach its target. It broke apart under concentrated fire and drifted silently into the dark, one more piece of wreckage in a battle that had, an hour earlier, been expected to end without a single Dominion loss. Vorn watched the exchange in silence, calculating losses that no longer made sense against any model his war college had ever taught him. Vorn stared at the wreckage of the Halex Ward drifting past his viewport, debris tumbling silently through a battle it could no longer take part in. Aboard the Ares Requiem, a squadron of 40 human fighters broke formation and dove toward a Dominion cruiser twice their combined mass. Dominion point defense systems tracked them, locked on and fired. The fighters were already gone, weaving through the fire in patterns the Dominion's targeting computers labeled statistically improbable. 2 fighters fell. 38 did not. They struck the cruiser's engine core in a single coordinated pass and turned 4 kilometers of alien warship into a slow, dying drift through the dark. On the Dominion bridge, a tactical officer stared at the replay in disbelief. Admiral, their fighter coordination exceeds anything in our combat simulations. It's like they've fought us before. They have not fought us before, Vorn said. They have simply spent 40 years imagining exactly this fight every day until it stopped being imagination. A young pilot's voice cut across the human battle net, broadcast wide enough that even the Dominion's own translators caught it. Formation Meridian hold the line, the pilot said. 40 years we hold the line. Beside him, another voice answered, holding. For the first time in 83 years, Admiral Cressel Vorn gave an order he had never given before in his life. Fall back, he said, full retreat. The retreat was not clean. 41 Dominion warships fell in the first hour alone. Human fire found gaps in shields the Dominion had trusted for centuries. Human pilots flew formations that Dominion war colleges had never studied, because those formations did not exist in any Dominion archive. They existed only in 40 years of quiet human planning, war-gamed in simulation chambers beneath mountains nobody, outside a handful of governments had ever known existed. Vorn stood on his bridge and watched his fleet break apart around him, ship after ship losing power, losing hull integrity, losing crew. Casualty report, he said. 62 ships destroyed, Thessa answered. 90 more critically damaged. We are being pushed out of the system, Admiral, and they are not even using their full fleet against us. Vorn said nothing at first. He was looking at a single tactical replay, over and over, frozen on the same frame. The moment his fleet had arrived, the moment his sensors had reported nothing, the moment he had ordered the poisoning of a planet he believed defenseless. They knew we were coming, he said quietly. Admiral. Not today, not this year. They knew a species like us existed 40 years ago, and they built an entire civilization's worth of silence around that fact. He turned to Thessa, something close to grief in his voice. Every choice we made from the first probe to this fleet was already accounted for before either of us were given command. Then what were we, Admiral? Thessa asked. If they planned for us this precisely, what was this battle to them? Vorn considered the question longer than he wanted to. A test, he said finally. One we failed and one they had been rehearsing for 40 years. Thessa checked her readouts one final time, and her voice dropped to something close to fear. Admiral, long-range scans. There are more shipyards under the ice caps, under the ocean floor. We only saw the ones they wanted us to see. There could be 100 more we haven't detected at all. Across the retreating fleet, similar reports reached every surviving Dominion captain. Ships that had spent centuries conquering unprepared worlds now ran diagnostics on their own shields, searching for weaknesses a single afternoon had exposed in front of an enemy who would remember every one of them. A captain aboard the cruiser Haven's Mercy stared at his own damage report in silence. 40% of his shield capacitors had failed under human fire, a failure rate his engineers had never seen in any prior campaign. He did not send that report to Vorn. He simply filed it and hoped High Command would blame the battle instead of the ship. How many ships could they still be hiding? I don't know, Thessa admitted. For the first time in my career, Admiral, I genuinely do not know. Behind them, on a secondary station, Corvin Desk watched the wreckage of 3 friends' ships drift past the viewport. He had logged his first campaign kill count only hours earlier, certain there would be nothing to record. Now he stared at a battle he had no framework to understand. Admiral, he said quietly, the tactical instructors never taught us this. None of the campaign archives cover an enemy that already knew our doctrine before the battle began. That is because no enemy ever has, Vorn said, until today. Desk said nothing further. He simply turned back to his station and began recording numbers that no longer resembled a war he recognized. Ray's voice returned to the bridge speakers one last time, quiet now, almost gentle. You called us harmless, she said. You called us fragile. You poured poison into our rivers and went to watch us die from orbit, the same way you watched 41 other species die before us. A pause. Somewhere behind that pause was the weight of 40 years, the weight of every engineer who had worked a life's career on a project they were never allowed to speak of, the weight of every soldier who trained for a war they hoped would never come. We let you believe we were weak, she continued, Because a predator that thinks its prey is defenseless never bothers to ask why the water tastes wrong. Vorn closed his eyes. Phase 3 complete, Reyes said. Leave our system, Admiral Vorn. Tell your Dominion what you found here. Tell them the truth this time, not the story your probes told you 40 years ago. The remaining Dominion fleet turned and fled Sol at maximum burn, leaving 61 warships as wreckage in Earth's orbit, a debris field that would remain there for centuries as a monument nobody in the Dominion would ever admit to building. As the last Dominion ship crossed the orbit of Neptune, Thessa Rin finally allowed herself to ask the question that had been building in her mind since the first pod failed to activate. Admiral, what do we tell High Command? Vorn did not answer for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried none of the confidence it had held only hours earlier. We tell them the truth, he said. We tell them there is a species in the Orion Arm that spent 40 years preparing a grave for the First Fleet arrogant enough to visit them, and we tell them not to send the second. 900 warships had entered Sol's system believing they faced an undefended, water-starved species with no fleet and no future. 412 of Earth's own ships escorted the survivors to the edge of the system and let them go. It was not mercy, it was a message. Admiral Cressel Vorn returned to Dominion space with 83 years of unbroken conquest ended in a single afternoon. His report would be read by generals across 6,000 star systems. Most would not believe it. All of them would remember it. On Earth, water still flowed through the taps of 8,300,000,000 people who had never known, not for one single day, that their species had come within 30 minutes of extinction. No news broadcast ever mentioned the pods. No headline ever used the words cleansing agent. The governments of Earth had spent 40 years learning how to keep a secret, and they intended to keep this one a little longer, at least until the world was ready to understand what had almost happened above its own sky. Dana Osai shut down her console in Facility 7, beneath the ruins of what used to be a simple filtration plant, and looked up through a reinforced skylight at a sky that had, for one afternoon, held 900 warships aimed at her planet. They never even knew what we drank the water for, she said to no one in particular. Her supervisor's voice came back over the line, tired but steady. None of them ever do, that's the whole point. In the weeks that followed, wreckage recovery teams moved quietly through Earth's orbit, gathering fragments of 61 Dominion warships for study. Every alloy sample, every drive component, every scrap of alien hull was cataloged and sent to the same underground facilities that had built the Meridian fleet in the first place. Project Meridian had never been designed to end with a single battle. It had been designed to end with an answer to a question no human government had ever said aloud. What happens when they come back with 1,000 more ships instead of 900? Fleet Director Alina Reyes stood in the observation deck of the Ares Requiem, watching the last Dominion warship vanish past Neptune's orbit, a single point of light shrinking into the dark. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. 61 Dominion ships and 3 human ships had been lost above her planet in a single afternoon, and somewhere in the wreckage were people who would never come home. On both sides of a war neither side had chosen to start on this particular day. She simply said the only words that mattered. Humanity does not drown quietly. Somewhere in Dominion space, weeks later, a report reached the desk of a high command that had never once lost a species it targeted. The report had one line highlighted in red. They knew we were coming. They have known for 40 years, and they are still building. 6,000 star systems away, in a chamber deep beneath the Andes Mountains, Project Meridian's status board did not power down after the battle ended. It simply changed one word. Active became continuing. General Marcus Hale received the final casualty report in the same windowless room where he had watched the first pods fall. 3 human ships lost, 61 Dominion ships destroyed, 8,300,000,000 people who would go to sleep that night never knowing how close the story had come to ending. He read the report twice, the way Admiral Vorn had read his own report twice on the other side of the battle. Then he set it down and looked at the wall of names behind him, engineers and soldiers who had not lived to see this day. "We held," he said quietly to no one, "40 years and we held." Because humanity had learned, 40 years ago, that the universe did not reward the loud or the proud. It rewarded the ones who were patient enough to wait and quiet enough to be underestimated for exactly as long as it took.